first stop on my adventure is the Kamana Caves, just outside of Hilo. To reach these caves, you have to descend 20 feet of very steep stairs. Now going down isn't a problem. Coming back up, well, let's just say you'll definitely burn off a little bit of your breakfast. But believe me, it's worth it. These lava tubes are estimated to be about 25 miles long. There's roughly about 2 miles accessible to the public. After that, they become private property. Now, the number one thing you need when you're exploring the lava tubes is a flashlight. Now, I'm not quite sure what I was thinking when I packed mine. If there is a man watching this video right now, he is totally shaking his head. My adventurous side really wanted to continue on deeper into the tubes. But because I didn't bring a decent flashlight, and on the day that I visited, I was the only person there. With my luck, I would trip and fall, hit my head, and be passed out in some deep, dark cave where no one knew where I was at. I guess you can say this was my first obstacle in my solo adventure. Next on the agenda, waterfalls. Seriously, who doesn't love a great waterfall? Our first stop is Rainbow Falls. This stunning waterfall is just steps away from the parking lot. That's correct. No aerobic activity is required for experiencing this beauty. Now, if you're hoping to catch one of those perfect Instagram photo moments, you'll have to come early when the rainbow is created by catching the waterfall's mist. Now, if you are looking to burn off some calories from those sugary, sweet, alcoholic drinks, you know, the ones with the cute little umbrellas in them, there is a trail you can hike up to the top of the falls. Unfortunately for me, due to the heavy rains the night before, the trail was closed. My thighs were redeemed on the next stop, Akaka Falls, which has a nice paved trail loop just under a half a mile. This spectacular waterfall is 442 feet high, and it is the highlight of the trail. It's been used as a filming site for several movies, including one from the 1930s about an outbreak of the bubonic plague. Somehow I found this very fitting since I was visiting at the time of COVID. By the end of the day, I was ready for some food, and because I'm staying in hostels with communal kitchens, I was definitely going to take advantage of the farmer's market. Now I know what you're thinking, hostels over the age of 50? But we'll get into that later on. These open markets are spectacular, especially if you're a fruit and veggie lover. And trust me, there's definitely some interesting exotic fruits, some of which I had never seen before. So speaking of the farmers markets, there's a couple of things here on the island I've fallen in love with. One are these bad boys. Their avocados are amazing. They're called butter avocados. They run about $2 each or 3 for $5. Where I'm from, you can get an avocado the size of a large egg and they're like $4 each. So definitely a great investment. The other one are these little guys. So I've been a little hesitant to try these. I finally did. They're delicious. And I have to admit the reason why I was hesitant is they kind of look like the coronavirus to me. I mean, come on, a little bit. Look at these little guys. My plans for the next day was to soak up some sun and do my best to get rid of my pasty white belly. So one thing to take into consideration is that the beaches on the Hilo side tend to be rocky. They're beautiful and definitely worth a stop. But because I was craving the sand between my toes, I decided to spend my afternoon at one of the more sandy beaches, closer to the Kona side of the island. Now, it had been a really long time since I'd done a beach vacation solo, and this is where I ran into my next big obstacle. As I was applying sunscreen, it occurred to me, how am I going to cover my back? So I did the best that I could and sprayed my back with sunscreen. It worked, but unfortunately, every time I was out in the sun, I would miss one little spot, and by the time I got home, my tan lines pretty much resembled an abstract art project. So I'm getting ready to go back to the hostel, and I have all my gear with me. My snorkel, my fins, blah, 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 towel. I throw it in the car, and I'm driving along, and all of a sudden, I'm like, oh my gosh, the back of my thighs and my ass are on fire. I'm like, what? Am I having a hot flash in my ass? Yeah, I hit the seat warmers. Who needs seat warmers in Hawaii? In the evening was the adventure I was looking forward to the most, a nighttime swim with the giant manta rays. The company I chose to go with was the Manta Ray Advocates, and I must say, they were fabulous. I chose them because rather than being plopped in the water with a gazillion other snorkelers and scuba divers, they have you swim a very short distance from a private sandy beach in small intimate groups of 6. And they have a short introduction guaranteeing that these 14-foot-long sea creatures won't try to eat you, which is always a good thing. Plus, they also make sure that all your equipment is fitted and you feel comfortable. I floated in the dark ocean for over 45 minutes, only fingertips away, watching these gentle giants do their barrels while feeding on the plankton. It was absolutely magical. As promised, back to the hostel. Now, if staying in a hostel gives you heart palpitations, I highly recommend watching my video, Hostels Over 50. I've stayed in many hostels and all over, and I promise it's not as stressful as you would think. Now, I stayed in 3 different hostels on my trip to the Big Island, and this one was by far my favorite, my Hawaiian hostel. I booked an all-female dorm room with 4 bunk beds. The location was great, the rooms were immaculate, and yes, there were others of a mature age staying there. And with their well-equipped large kitchen, it made it far too easy for me to watch my thighs grow when I was making my huge bowl of guacamole every night. Did I mention how good the avocados were? But my favorite thing was all the extra amenities. It was the only hostel that had beach chairs, towels, boogie boards, all of which were free to use. The next day, I decided to explore the Kona coast by kayak. Now, I'm going to apologize now for the terrible video, including the lovely shot of my fat knee, but I'm sure you can get past it and hopefully get the gist of how much fun this adventure was. I booked a 4-hour kayaking, snorkeling, sea cave tour with ocean safaris, and they did not disappoint. Due to COVID, there was only 4 of us, including our guide, who was very knowledgeable in Hawaiian history and culture. The hardest part about this entire tour was getting back into your kayak. Our guide was nice enough to let me know how graceful I was getting back in, but somehow I think there was quite a bit of sarcasm with that. Not only did we go into a couple of sea caves, but we stopped at a fabulous snorkeling spot with a 10-foot high cliff jump. After a bit of a pep talk, I was able to jump off the 10-foot cliff. Our next stop was a 30-foot drop. I was completely out. But as you can see, one of the youngins in our group was brave enough to give it a shot. Oh, to be young and still have cartilage.
All right, Beth, or Sam, come here. Woo!
On my last day in Hawaii, I decided to visit one of the famous black sand beaches. Now, the drive was going to be over an hour, so I decided to stop at this bakery that was highly recommended online. And holy moly, I can see why. Half an hour later, and not because it was crowded, but because I couldn't decide what ginormous sandwich I wanted, I was back in my car and I hit the road. No, I didn't get a donut. Lord knows I wanted one. Now, I've never been to a black sand beach before, and I have to admit I was a little bit on the fence whether the drive would be worth it or not, but let me tell you, it was. The way the sun hits the dark sand, well, the only way you can really describe it is like diamonds. It just sparkles. The other amazing thing about this beach are the protected Hawaiian green turtles. Now, don't judge, but I was a little surprised they weren't actually green. As I sat there consuming my gut-busting sandwich, I watched one of these turtles take over 40 minutes to join his friends on the beach. Somehow, I couldn't help but think that the universe was trying to tell me that I really needed to get back on my treadmill when I got home. This was a fabulous vacation, but unfortunately there was a huge hiccup at the end of the week. If you'd like to find out what that was, watch my video, What Went Wrong in Hawaii.